Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Corn Board.
This is Jane. She thinks she's just filling her car, but she's also filling the air with cancer-causing toxic chemicals used to boost octane in gas. What doesn't burn in the engine enters the air and your lungs, even your heart and brain. Bad for everyone, especially kids. Ethanol is a natural octane booster, clean burning and non-toxic. More ethanol means less scary stuff in our gas and in the air we breathe. And that makes your choice pretty plain, Jane. American Ethanol, cleaner air for Nebraska.
Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and major funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Corn Board.
Welcome to this week's edition of Market Journal. I'm Jeff Wilkerson. On this episode, Doug Simon looks at U.S. planting progress. Tamra Jackson-Ziems explains how corn growers can scout for seedling diseases. Stephen Wegulo describes winter wheat diseases. And Terry Hejny talks about the Nebraska LEAD Program. Doug Simon from Tredas is our corn and soybean market analyst this week. The U.S. Department of Agriculture is projecting U.S. farmers will produce 14.1 billion bushels of corn this year, down from 15.1 in 2016. The agency's May crop report, released Wednesday, also forecasted a 4.3 billion bushel soybean crop, only slightly lower than last year. The USDA's changes to supply and demand led to a decrease in corn ending stocks for 2017-18, but an increase to ending stocks in soybeans. We talked with Doug Thursday morning and began by asking for his overall thoughts on the USDA's estimates.
The report had acres from March 31st planting intentions and had average yields, and so there were really no big surprises there. Big questions are going to be about exports and about ethanol and those type of numbers. And they actually had the corn exports down by about 350 million bushels, which is about, that's a pretty big number. But the beet number is actually up by 100 million bushels, which is a little bit surprising.
That corn number, why is it so drastic?
Well, we've had really good export commitments for both corn, beans, and wheat this year because of the reduced crops in South America and Brazil on corn last year and the soybeans in Argentina. And so we've had a really good export book this year, but they'll be back in the market next year being more aggressive competitors. And so our exports just, would be expected to be down next year.
The other big international player is China. They're the second largest producer behind the U.S. Now, they're also lowering their corn acres. Can you explain why that's happening and what's going on over there?
Well, they've got huge carryover stocks, and their stocks can't be in great shape. And so they've been trying to subsidize the sales and to move that through the system as they can to make sure that corn just doesn't rot in the ground. But then they're also, trying to increase the production of soybeans, which they're a big importer of, and reduce the acreage on the corn, and try to balance that out a little bit more than where they are right now.
You also mentioned soybeans up 100 million bushels in exports. Why the benefit?
Well, I see some other analysts dropping those numbers because of if we see more export competition from Argentina and Brazil next year. So that's a little bit surprising. But we've had surprisingly strong imports from China over a long period of time. USDA has consistently underestimated those. Perhaps maybe they are right. Maybe we'll bump those up by 100 million bushels. But that's about a dollar swing in the market if they're flat on exports next year, or if they bump them up 100 million.
The ethanol number, another 50 million bushels for next year.
That's encouraging.
Yeah, what does that mean for the industry?
That's very encouraging. I think the nice thing is Sonny Perdue, in one of his comments about the overall farm policy, was encouraging towards the RFS standards, which should, I think, be supportive to the ethanol side of it. And if you look at oil prices, they've dropped $10 here a barrel. I think you drop price of oil, basically you increase demand, and you blend more ethanol, so that should be favorable. So those things are all positive for the ethanol industry.
So update me on planting progress across country and here in Nebraska especially.
Well, if you look at different areas, they're a little bit ahead of pace actually in Illinois and Indiana. about on par in Ohio and Iowa, which with all the rain they've had, everybody's really worried more about those areas. And then if you look at the areas where it's been drier up in the Dakotas and relatively drier up in Minnesota, they're actually behind. So it's kind of a conundrum in my mind. But so hopefully we'll see a little bit better progress over time here. But the rain that we keep getting through that, what I would consider to be southern Illinois, southern Indiana, it's definitely some really bad in that area. But overall, you got to wonder if maybe we lose 1 million acres out there in that area, but we could potentially see some more acres planted up in that Dakota area. That tends to be where we lose acres. They historically are wetter up there, and they've had, if you look at the drought monitor map, that's the only area of yellow is up on that North Dakota, South Dakota border area.
Before we talk about selling strategies, where are the funds at right now?
They're very short. If you look at corn plus beans plus wheat plus meal, plus the cattle, even though they're very long cattle, if you look at that overall complex, there's a lot of short interest in that, which tends to, at some point, they get scared out of those positions, and we should see some type of rally based on that, just because I'm not real optimistic in terms of prices, just because of the overwhelming stocks that we've got in the U.S. and the world. But when those funds jump around, you can see some 30-cent price swings in the price of corn and 50 cents to 75 cents in the beans because of that.
Yeah, it's been really quiet over the last month or so. Is the market just trying to figure out where to go with all the news about planting and where the acres go? That's
correct. And the acreage numbers, last time I was here, we were just before the planting intentions and trying to figure out how many acres of corn. And we came in right at 90 on the corn, and the beans are just below at 89.5. So right away when that report came out in March, everybody's calculating in their head, okay, what happens if we drop the yield on corn from 170 down to 165, and what implications that have for price. So the market's really range bound right now, trying to wait and determine what the weather's going to be like during the summer. I think everybody's going to be trying to figure out, there's been talk about moving toward El Nino. It seems like now Australians, the Bureau of Meteorology, have kind of backed that off and they're more neutral. So the big question is for the summer, my guess is we're probably going to be a little more volatile weather pattern, might not be stuck in a really favorable El Nino type situation, not in a really hot, dry scenario, but probably some ups and downs, which hopefully will give us some chances to sell corn at some higher prices. If we get those funds that cover, see some jumps up toward $4, I think people definitely need to be looking at selling that. Soybeans are undervalued probably right now relative to the seasonals are a little stronger going into the summer. Hopefully we get some rebounds on those soybeans, but any rebounds we do get, people need to be looking at selling strategies where you hedge, use some hedge derives, use some puts, do some things like looking at some different scenarios based on the producer's exact situation.
Your preference, though, for old crop would be to wait a little bit?
Well, the basis levels during the time when people are in the field have actually firmed up on both the soybeans and the corn. We're 20 under up at Columbus right now, which is, if you look at that versus the May, that's essentially a 12 under. And we traded 10 under the D's back at Thanksgiving, Christmas time. So we're kind of in the same range as what we were through the marketing year on the corn. So it's pretty favorable basis right now. The futures aren't really attractive this week because we've been down a little bit earlier in the week. So I'd like to see a little firmer futures price, but I think the basis levels for corn and beans are both pretty attractive right now relative to where we've been through the season.
Next week, Luke Beckman from Central Valley Ag will join us to look at corn and soybean markets. Nebraska corn farmers are tracking ahead of the U.S. average in corn planting completion. The latest progress report showed the state's growers were 48% finished putting this season's crop in the ground. It also listed 10% as emerged. On Tuesday, we talked with Nebraska Extension plant pathologist Tamra Jackson-Ziems to learn about any potential seedling diseases that might cause issues. We started by asking about seed that was put in before cool, wet weather moved in last week.
I would recommend that our producers make sure and monitor the fields that were already planted and that are under extra stress, and especially other fields that may have some ponding in the past. The wet conditions that we saw are going to promote some seedling diseases, so we may see that any time now, and it may impact stand establishment.
Tell me more about the most at-risk fields.
The fields that are most at risk are ones that stay wetter longer, or the ones that were in the very cold climates. We had a lot of snow in a band across Nebraska, and very cold temperatures, and soil temperatures dropped as much as 30 degrees. There are certain seedling pathogens that are going to be more active at some of those colder temperatures, and those are the ones I'm most concerned about.
How do you find potential problems?
And so what I would do when I'm out in the field, I would consider when you planted and what's happened to that field since then. And so I would look for seedling emergence and make sure that they're evenly emerging. And so when you start seeing skips, you're going to want to get your shovel out and go ahead and investigate what's going on below the ground, because if any of these fields are heavily impacted, there might have to be some replanting decisions made, and there are some really great guidelines online on Crop Watch to help make those decisions.
Once you dig, what are you looking for?
Well, there's a lot of types of symptoms that seedling diseases can cause. They can cause rotting both before or after seedling emergence, and so the seed can rot before it ever germinates. It can also rot after it germinates, before it emerges, in a hypocotyl rot, and so you look for the discolored brown roots or hypocotyls. They can break off easily, so you're going to have to be really careful with them. They can also damp off after they emerge too and die very quickly.
How long do you need to be scouting in the field? I mean, from now until?
You know, seedling diseases can develop for several weeks, and it may be up to about 4 weeks. You want to watch that. If we have really great growing conditions, these plants are going to take off, grow very quickly, and mostly be out of risk after that point. But while we've still got some questionable weather conditions, I'd certainly be aware of it.
Why is it important to know?
It's important for us to know if we have a seed establishment issue going on out there, for one, because you want to make sure that you have an adequate planting population out there. And so having to make a replant decision, it's not something anybody wants to do, but that would have to be done very quickly. Other things to consider too is that any plants that are impacted by disease but survive the infection, those plants in that field could be impacted later on in the season by stalk rot diseases or other diseases, and so we would watch that field for the rest of the season.
Any reason to document it for further instances when you plant corn again?
It's probably always a good idea to document where some of these problem spots or problem fields are. As we learn more about seedling pathogens, we're learning that certain species of Pythium, for example, are more active at lower temperature, or some more active at higher temperature, and that certain active ingredients are variable too at different temperatures. And so we're learning more and more about that, and that can help make decisions later on if they keep good notes.
As we start thinking about diseases later on in the season, tell me more about bacterial leaf streak, maybe what we know about it since we last talked.
Well, we first reported that first time in the United States in Nebraska last year in 2016. Well, unfortunately, the bacteria do overwinter very well. And so I want to warn people that if they've had it in their area, in their county, it's likely that they're going to see this again. And so we want to be mindful that this disease can show up, and we've seen it show up as early as seedling corn, as early as V6 or 7. Certainly it could come earlier than that. We want to make sure people know how to identify it, and then it can look a lot like gray leaf spot. And so let us know if they have what they think is bacterial leaf streak or something else. We also have a survey going on right now because we're trying to learn the distribution of this disease in Nebraska.
You can find more information about corn seedling diseases in Tamra's recent Crop Watch article, available through a link on the Market Journal website. The USDA's latest progress report indicates the condition of Nebraska's winter wheat has slipped somewhat. During the last week of April, half the crop was listed in good to excellent condition, but the most recent ratings for the first week of May put only 36% in those categories, a drop of 14 points. Still, only 17% is considered poor to very poor. That's different from Kansas, where 27% of the state's winter wheat is listed in the worst two categories, 11 points higher than the previous week. On Tuesday, we talked with Nebraska Extension Stephen Wegulo to get an outlook of potential disease issues. We started by asking for an overview of Nebraska's crop.
The wheat looks pretty good. I was out in southwest Nebraska last week and in south central as well as southeast Nebraska. And the wheat looks quite good, very little disease at this time. In the southwest, we had that snowstorm that hit the area at the end of April. It did very little damage, some lodging, but overall the wheat was looking very good.
Let's talk about some potential issues. How widespread is stripe rust right now?
Stripe rust is widespread throughout the wheat growing areas in the state, but it's at very low levels at this time. A few fields have a significant amount, but in the lower canopy. But most fields have very little stripe rust. The current warm weather will slow it down a little bit, but it's cooling down, and once we get moisture, it can start developing rapidly again.
Is it enough now to warrant treatment?
Yes, in some fields it depends on the situation. So if you have a field that you are irrigating, there is moisture, and so you would watch it, watch that field, and if you see stripe rust and you are irrigating, you will be better off to spray to protect the flag leaf. Also, fields that have a thick stand, they tend to hold a lot more humidity in the canopy, which can condense at night to form dew, and that moisture can help the stripe rust to develop and cause damage to the wheat. So those are two high risk situations. But if you have a field that has good airflow going through, there is a lot of space within the canopy, and it keeps dry, and you don't see stripe rust or leaf rust, which we just actually also confirmed on Friday last week. And then you don't need to spray at this time. I would suggest that you just keep a watch on those fields, and until you see disease moving up close to the flag leaf, and then you would have to worry about that. But I've seen some fields that have, just no disease at all as well. So,
are there fungal leaf spot diseases?
The most common fungal leaf spot right now that I have seen is septoria leaf blotch. It's favored by moisture, just like the rusts, and a little bit of tan spot, which tends to be more common when wheat is drilled into wheat stubble, or if wheat stubble is present on the soil surface, and then you tend to see more of the tan spot. But septoria is the most common one. In some fields, it's actually moving up the canopy, and keep a watch on those fields. If you see the septoria, which will be brown, dead, necrotic spots, sometimes surrounded by a yellow halo on the leaf, and they can form large blotches of brown dead tissue on the leaf. If you see that moving up the canopy, then consider applying a fungicide to protect the flag leaf. So because we just confirmed leaf rust, which is favored by warmer weather, like what we are having right now, you need to watch for leaf rust as well. So leaf rust plus the fungal leaf spots can cause, they can develop in moist conditions as well as in warm conditions like we have. So you need to watch out for those. But the key is to scout and determine the level of disease that is in the field, and if it's significant enough or spreading towards the upper canopy, then that's when you need to worry about applying a fungicide. Otherwise, just keep a watch, and if there is no disease or very little disease, you don't have to worry about it at this time.
Stephen says wheat streak mosaic is also present in the Panhandle and could be easily misidentified as a fungal disease. He says an accurate diagnosis of either is essential, as fungicides can't control wheat streak mosaic. If you're unsure about an issue, Stephen recommends you contact your local Nebraska Extension office or send a sample to UNL's Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic. The Maine Nebraska farmer says a new competition offered by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln is aiming to get growers in western Nebraska to optimize profitability and efficiency. The program is called TAPS, or Testing Ag Performance Solutions. Its first annual farm management competition matches producers against each other as well as UNL scientists. TAPS will give 3 awards, one for the most profitable competitor, another for the best use of water and nitrogen, and the final for the highest yield. You can read about how the competition works in the Maine Nebraska Farmer. More than 1,000 people have participated in the Nebraska LEAD program since its beginning in 1981, and the group is now looking for applicants to be part of its 37th class. Terry Hejny is the program's director. He talked with us earlier this week to describe how someone might benefit from joining the LEAD program.
Well, for your viewers out there, the Nebraska LEAD program is a 2-year adult agricultural leadership development program. We're out and about right now ramping up our recruiting efforts for Nebraska LEAD Group 37.
Tell me about the fellowship.
Well, the fellowship, if someone's fortunate to secure one, it's worth about $14,000 over that 2-year period. Of course, we do have a minimal tuition fee of $2,500, but what happens for them, Jeff, is their first year they'll study state, local, national issues. Also includes 10 days to Kansas City, Washington, D.C., and Chicago. Second year will build on the first year studies and will include what I consider a capstone experience, would be an international study travel seminar to 3 different countries.
Can you go deeper into that? Tell me some of the things that are involved month to month, year to year.
Well, sure. You know, our first seminar, when they kick off, it's developing your or assessing your leadership potential, and you know, we want to find out and have them find out where they're at, where their strengths are, where there are some things that they need to work on. You know, we'll move into Southwest Nebraska a couple weeks later on energy issues, water issues. A few weeks after that, communication skills. You know, we'll be at the University of Nebraska at Kearney, and they'll be diving into a lot of speaking exercises, but you know, also some listening exercises, which I think listening is very important for today's leader. And you know, with those speaking exercises, they're getting to know each other better. You know, we're going to put a media panel in front of them. They're going to meet the press, radio, TV, newspaper, get them prepared for the future. So that's just a small sampling of what they do that first year.
Tell me more about the domestic and international travel experience.
Well, the national experience puts them together for 10 days. You know, we're going to travel from Lincoln down to Peru State College. We're going to learn about nuclear energy. We're going to visit Cooper Nuclear Station. And in Kansas City, we're going to visit with the EPA. We're going to visit with our friends at the American Royal, the Ag Biz Council of Kansas City, the Federal Reserve Bank. But this is a chance that they'll get to meet with business leaders in agriculture and industry that shape ag policy. And then, you know, we move into Washington, D.C. for about 5 days, and you know, that's always an exciting time to be in our nation's capital, to meet with our United States senators and congressmen, and to make those important contacts. Also, you know, visiting the National Corn Growers and the National or American Farm Bureau Federation, those types of organizations that many of our LEAD fellows get involved in and do a lot with. From there, we move to Chicago for a couple days, and then it's back to Lincoln eventually, and I'm hoping they're always speaking to each other when they get back.
And if they're not, the international trips?
Well, the international seminar is a whole different thing. I mean, it's very fast-paced, as all of our seminars are. Early mornings, late nights, traveling 3 countries. This last January, traveled with Nebraska LEAD Group 35 to China, Laos, and Thailand. Opportunities for them to visit our U.S. embassies in those countries, understand U.S. policy and how we work with countries developing markets for our ag products, a chance to learn about the people and their culture, religion, education, healthcare, labor force, and so forth. So it's more than just agriculture, but it's an opportunity for them to see the global impact that a Nebraska farmer, rancher, or agribusinessman can have in the world.
What does someone get out of the program?
What do they get out of it? Well, Jeff, what they tell me is confidence. Confidence that they can advocate and can speak for agriculture. Self-confidence that they can make a difference. That they're helping to move agriculture forward here in Nebraska and in our nation. The issues, though, that we put in front of them, many sides of the story, so they have a very good understanding of how different decisions will affect different parts of the population. Also the networking, not only with their LEAD fellows themselves and the over 1,000 alums that are out there from the Nebraska LEAD program, but the experts across this state, across our nation, and the world that they can rely on for information. A leader can't know everything, but they've got to know people who can give them the right information and the correct information and help them make good decisions.
The application deadline for Nebraska LEAD Class 37 is June 15th. You can find more details about the program, including application information, online at lead.unl.edu. Now, with this week's weather forecast, here's Nebraska Extension Ag Climatologist Al Dutcher.
Well, folks, here we again for the weekly forecast, and of course during this last week we've seen the warm weather at the beginning of the week kind of gave way to a little bit of thunderstorm and rain activity during the midweek period as we had a frontal boundary cross through our region with the main precipitation shield to our south. Although we did see most of the heavy precipitation this week to our south, the precipitation on Wednesday did hit northern Nebraska and eastern Nebraska and actually got stronger as it moved to the east, giving more precipitation to some of the soggy areas of eastern Iowa and northern Illinois. Very cold conditions the last few days will be giving way to warmth as we see high pressure that's moved into our region start to build toward the east. So as we go to the upper air models, what we are going to notice is that high pressure system now finally in place. It's going to scour out that cold air to the east, start warm conditions up And for our region, we're looking at very nice temperatures this weekend as we have a surface low pressure system in northeastern Wyoming that primarily will impact the northern plains, northwestern plains with precipitation. You can see that we're basically dry here in the central United States, and we expect that trend to continue into Sunday as that high pressure system moves just slightly to the east. We'll see some surface low pressure system to our southwest, but it doesn't look like they'll have any moisture to work with as it develops rather rapidly. Most of the precipitation remains in the Pacific Northwest with that upper air trough that will start to get its act together as we get into Monday. Starts to dive deeper into the southwest, bringing a southwest to northeast flow. We had a couple areas of low pressure systems developing in our region, but we have no Gulf moisture to feed into these systems, so most of the moisture will be across the northern plains and the central Rocky Mountain region. Now that the high pressure system moves toward the east, we get more of a south and southerly flow. We have low pressure that shows the development kicking out of that upper air low at the surface across the Dakotas. And in terms of precipitation, we are looking at widespread precipitation from Wisconsin westward all the way to the west coast. And as we go into Wednesday, that low really starts to intensify, shoots another piece of energy. We start to see low pressure trying to develop in the southern central plains region, and that will start to spread some of the precipitation into the central Rockies and continue to feed moisture across the northern plains where we expect significant moisture accumulations. Now as we get into Thursday, upper air low makes it a little farther toward the east. We start to see low pressure organizing just to our south and to our west at the surface. And then in terms of precipitation, we are looking at that precipitation field filling in across the central Rockies, eventually moving out into our region as we go into Friday. So here's the upper air low expected to be in eastern Colorado. The surface low will be in western Kansas, and deep moisture starts to funnel around this upper air low system. So we are going to see widespread precipitation across the central plains and the western plains, with potential for severe weather developing to our south, and possibly, depending on how the models move this, we could see this severe weather start to erupt here across Nebraska. Now, as we look at the 8 to 14-day forecast, that cold air continues as we have another low pressure system that will, upper air low, that will move into the central Rockies. The warmth moves to our east, and in terms of precipitation, with another system coming in, widespread precipitation across the entire Corn Belt.
Thanks, Al. Today's interviews can be found individually on the Market Journal website and through the Market Journal mobile app. They include information on the USDA's May crop report, corn seedling diseases, winter wheat diseases, and the Nebraska LEAD Program. As always, you can keep up with Market Journal during the week by following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Next week, Luke Beckman will be our corn and soybean market analyst, and Aaron Berger will talk about using ethanol co-products to increase pasture stocking rates. Until then, thanks for watching. I'm Jeff Wilkerson. We'll see you next week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and major funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Corn Board. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.